very pleased to be here tonight to talk about this particular subject. It's one that I stumbled into while doing research on C.A. Stevens, actually, a long time ago. C.A. Stevens published a story here in the local Norway Advertiser about this particular baseball team. So that caused me to want to learn more about it, and it turned out that there was a lot more to learn, as hopefully we will all find out this evening. First of all, I'd just like to start with a general and I hope rather rapid overview of baseball history anyhow. Even if you're not interested in baseball, you might find this somewhat enlightening. One thing I find interesting about baseball is that originally it was two words, base and ball, always separate, base, ball. So up until about 1870, any reference to the game is two words, base, ball. And about the same time that baseball was becoming the popular national sport, which is about the same time as the Civil War, shortly before and shortly after, another great social event was developed called picnicking. Picnicking, people started to picnic, and picnic also was two words, picnic, two separate words. It's baseball, picnic. And both of them about the same time developed hyphens, and then both of them about the same time became one word. Who knows how things like that happen, but it's interesting. It's interesting that things like that happen. So if you don't remember anything else about what I said tonight, you'll remember about baseball, picnic, and fireballs. Will Anderson wrote a book in 1992 called "Was Baseball Really Invented in Maine?" And many of you may have seen that book. I think you can still find it at yard sales and so on. And at the very opening of the book, he said, well, of course not, but I figured if I called my book this, more people would buy it than otherwise. But he did have some interesting points to make about Maine as a location for a lot of interesting baseball lore. And when I first talked on this subject a couple of years ago at Hebron Academy, the title of the talk was Baseball Really Invented in Hebron. Sort of for the same reason, but you can actually make a case that Maine baseball began in Hebron, came quickly over here to Norway, and hopefully I'll be able to explain those connections in some kind of reasonable fashion before the evening is over. A lot of people think that the game was invented by Abner Doubleday in Cooperstown, New York, and most people who've done just a little bit of homework realize that's simply a legend. Where baseball came from is a deep, dark mystery, and there are scholars forever trying to find the earliest example of the game, or the ball, or the field, or references to it, and so on. Most early references have to do not with the game itself, but with the fact that people were upset that it was happening. Because, for example, in as early as the 1330s, believe it or not, in English local law, there are references to stopping the boys from playing this ball game, which causes, because the ball flies and breaks things and so on, so people get hurt. And then 300 years later, 1600s, there are other references, but they're negative. They're, we've got to stop this ball. The boys should be out in the field working, and they're wasting time playing ball. The baseball part of it, and the British cricket part of it, and so on, is also another mystery. How did those happen, and how did they begin and separate, and so on? There are in the United States, there are references in the 1700s, late 1700s, to this game, which is probably baseball being played. It wasn't called baseball at the time. It had a variety of different names, often just ball. In Norway, actually, the very earliest reference to baseball being played in Norway is an ordinance of March 10th, 1849, which the town fathers said that no ball should be played within 10 rods of any dwelling house. And you'll have, they're going around, okay. So Norway fit the pattern of many other places where baseball is first mentioned, and it's first mentioned in a negative context. That is, it's a problem. Let's stop it somehow. Probably the earliest baseball in the United States was in the 1820s in terms of organized baseball, and then in the 1840s and 50s, the game became more organized, and by the time of the mid-1850s, there were several rather organized leagues of baseball teams, probably not professional at the time, but they had names. They played in leagues and so on, and they had different sets of rules. There were the primary sets of rules were these Massachusetts rules, which were played by the teams in the Boston area, and the New York rules, which were played by the teams in the New York area. And at one point, the two groups got together, and I think there's still Cracker Jacks in the middle chair there. The New York and the Massachusetts teams got together to try to arrive at one set of rules, and through a variety of back and forth and so on and so forth, it turned out that the New York rules prevailed. And the New York rules are essentially the rules that baseball is played with today. It's 9 people on a team, and the way the diamond is shaped and the rough dimensions and so on. And most of the rules are similar. Not all. There's some interesting exceptions that we'll mention here. But then when the Civil War occurred, with hundreds, millions really, of young men marching around the country and having lots of time on their hands, a month with nothing to do, and then a battle, and then another month with nothing to do. That most people agree that that's when baseball actually spread nationally and became a sport that people were familiar with everywhere. So when the soldiers came back from the Civil War, if there hadn't been a local town team at the time, there certainly were then. It was, as I say, just before the Civil War that the official rules, the New York rules, were accepted. So by the time the Civil War came to an end, baseball, as we know it today, was rather common all across the nation, teams in almost all the towns, and professional leagues formed, as local teams playing each other and school teams and so on. But actual professional leagues, excuse me, with players being paid real money to play ball. In 1859, for example, this is just before the Civil War, the Portland Transcript mentioned, mentioned, you can tell baseball was well known at the time. The Portland Transcript said, "It's much better to play a game of ball than to loaf around drinking in saloons and billiard rooms and club rooms. One of our exchanges thinks that ball playing would prove agreeable and useful to ladies as well as to gentlemen. No doubt, but then the ladies must adopt the bloomer costume. A ball once lost under the circumference of crinoline would be very difficult to regain." Will Anderson thought, when he wrote his book, the earliest reference to a baseball game actually played in Maine was 1860. Bowdoin College played a Portland team. But there's, with the availability of newspapers online these days and so on, you can't criticize Will Anderson for not finding earlier games. The research that's possible to do these days simply makes that sort of thing a lot easier than it used to be. And it turns out that, sure enough, there were baseball games, official baseball games, played in Maine before that. There is an 1858 game between a Boston team and a Maine team, another 1858 game between 2 Portland teams, and excuse me. And probably the earliest one I've been able to find is an 1858 game that's actually between 2 Maine teams played in Maine. It's an 1858 game between the Portland Eons and the Forest City, the Portland team that called the Forest Cities, whatever, the cities in the forest. And the Portland Eons we'll hear some more about later on. When the professional leagues were formed, or the organized leagues were formed in Maine, which was, excuse me, the first league was formed in 1867 after the Civil War. The teams developed a set of rules. You had to pay some money to get in to the league. Thank you very much. It's those Cracker Jacks. Norway, the Norway team, which was called the Pennesseewassees, joined the league. At that time, there was a team in Portland, there was a team in Lewiston, there was a team in Westbrook, the Sacarappas, there was a team, and Bowdoin College also had a team. All you really had to do to join this league was simply to pay the money and agree to play by the rules, which was an oversight, I think, which was exploited, as you will see, by the Pennesseewassees. Here in this area, the surviving history, of which there is quite a lot, this article here and this one and some others here, they talk about the Pennesseewassees as being the original baseball team in this area, but that's not exactly the case. The very first teams that were formed in this area seem to be a team from Paris Hill. It's mentioned in the paper that there was a ball game played with the Paris Hill team in 1862, but it's just a mention. Who they were, or whether it was connected to the academy or just fellows up there, it's hard to say. But also the history of Hebron Academy says that in 1862 also a team was formed at Hebron Academy. So it's pretty likely that the Hebron Academy team and the Paris Hill team, which would only be a few miles apart, were probably playing the first organized baseball in this area. And that was in 1862. And I suspect that they probably continued to play 1863, 4, 5, but I've pretty carefully read the local newspapers during those years. And aside from the history of Hebron Academy mentioning the ball team, but the other records at Hebron Academy don't seem to mention it at all, so it's kind of just a tease. I haven't been able to find anything about the actual people who played on those early teams at Paris Hill or at Hebron. In 1865-66, there start to appear in the paper mentions of ball games played between these teams in which they actually mention people who are on the team. They'll print a roster. In 1865-66, there was games played between Paris Hill Academy and the Oxford Normal School. So that's two Paris teams. And one interesting thing is I found references to many teams around the area, but the Norway Liberal Institute, which is, you would think, if Paris and Oxford and Hebron and so on were forming teams, the Norway Liberal Institute would also form a team, but I can't find any reference to a Norway Liberal Institute team in any of these 1860, early 1870 references. So it's a curiosity. Why didn't the local team here in Norway have a local school here in Norway have a team? And it could very well be because Hebron Academy at the time, which absolutely had a team which consisted of a lot of people from Norway. This is a blow up of this article over here. Probably should put it over here. But Charles, then you can't.
That's way to hold it. Do you need to hold it?
Charles is, no, it will be okay. I just don't want to stand in front of it because I want people to be able to see it. So this is the Pennesseewassees. This is the team that won the silver ball, and these fellows are all from Norway. But the ones with the tags on them that say 67, those are all mentioned in the newspaper as members of the Hebron Academy team in 1867 playing the Paris team. So you can see that the Norway Pennesseewassees are almost entirely Hebron Academy fellows. The two question marks, these two fellows, this is Silas Burnham. I bet a lot of money he went to Hebron Academy, but in the early records, it's hard to tell who was there and who wasn't. Since two of his brothers were there, I mean, he had to be there, right? So he's got a question mark. And then Isaac Morrill, who is from Buckfield, he's the only person on this list who's not actually a Norwegian. He's from Buckfield. But he probably was also a Hebron Academy student because his father was a mill owner in Buckfield, and they were far and away the wealthiest family in Buckfield. The likelihood is slim that if these young men are from fairly well-to-do families here in the Norway area too. So the likelihood is if families are sending their kids off to private school and Buckfield is only a stone's throw from Hebron, he was probably also at Hebron Academy. So I'm guessing here that of the 11 people on the chart who were Pennesseewassies, 8, 9 of them were Hebrew Academy students, and all of them except Isaac Morrow were Norwegians. So that even raises a more interesting question about Norway Liberal Institute. Why were the Norway families sending their kids to Hebrew Academy as opposed to the local high school? Hard to say. Hebrew was a Baptist school at the time. It was run as it was a Baptist alternative to the congregational private schools that were located in the city. It could very well be that the families had Paris was a Baptist town, although Norway wasn't. Norway was a Unitarian Universalist town for the most part. So the influential families in Norway were Universalists, whereas in Paris they were Baptist. One of many, many interesting ways that the two societies on each side of the railroad tracks did not get along. But so somebody else will have to do the research on why it is that the local folks here, the well-to-do folks of Norway, sent their kids to Hebron rather than the Norway Liberal Institute. It would be nicer locally if all of these fellows went to Norway Liberal Institute and then became Pennesseewassies. Then we could have the whole thing tied up right here in town. But as it is, we have to give part of the ball to Hebron Academy. Some of the other teams that were playing in the area right after the Civil War were the Dashaways of South Paris, and the Little Androscoggins from Welshville, the Fleetfoots of Mechanic Falls, the Alerts of Norway, the Tyconics of South Paris, the Arctic Club of Bryant Pond, way up there in the north, the Kyoto Club of Oxford Village, the Lone Stars of Frost's Corner. You know, so Norway, just on this little list, Norway's got 3 teams and maybe 4. And the Ursa Majors of Norway, that's a really interesting group. The Ursa Majors, if you recall, gosh, how many years ago was the year of the Oxford Bear? It was a long time ago. We had a talk here about the Oxford Bears.
Where's here?
It was a long time ago, right? Locally, folks from Oxford County were known as Bears, the Oxford Bears, and that was 2005, actually, bicentennial. And there were a group of senior citizens here in Norway. Average age on this team was 45 years old. They formed a team called the Ursa Majors because they were the old guys. And they didn't actually play very good baseball. They got crushed once by the Pennesseewassies. The Pennesseewassies beat them by over 100 runs. But they had a good time. Let's see, there were the Herculeans. The Hebron Academy team was called the Herculeans, by the way, the Herculeans of Hebron Academy. And in the 1867 lineup of the Herculeans were these people with the 67s, as well as a few others. There was Addison Herrick, who was named after Addison Barrow, who was from Bethel. There was a George Wallace, not the George Wallace that you know, different George Wallace. From Hebron, Charles Cole, who then went off to Bowdoin and probably played against the Pennesseewassies when they played the Bowdoin team. So in the spring of 1867, this team was formed according to Clarence Smith, these are Clarence Smith's recollections are in this article. The reporter from the Boston Globe came up to Norway and talked to Clarence Smith here, who was, I think keep mentioning the fellow, but he was the brother-in-law of Addison Barrow. Addison married his sister. He was also the fellow, by the way, there's a nice folder on Clarence Smith, I think, in the collection. Clarence Smith supposedly was the inventor of the turned-up snowshoe, and he worked for one of the snowshoe companies here in town, and may have been responsible for, because of that invention, the fact that the Norway snowshoes became so popular in really creating an industry here in Norway. So quite an interesting fellow. And the reporter from the Boston Globe came up here in 1907 and talked with Clarence Smith. It begins here talking about Clarence Smith's recollections and so on. So this is mostly a Clarence So excuse me, in 1867, a couple of months after this team was formed, the various well-known clubs from around southern Maine organized this league. They called it the Maine State Association of Baseball Players, 2 words. There were the Eons and the Athletics from Portland. There were the Kushnocks from Augusta, the Androscoggins of Lewiston, the Bowdoin College Club, and the Pennesseewassies of Norway. So that was the entire league. And they, with the money that they had to pay in order to form this league, they bought the silver ball, which would go to the champion each year. The champion team would get to have this silver ball to guard until they were challenged, and you could keep it or lose it. The silver ball, the very first silver ball, was won by the Eons in Portland, who beat the Kushnocks for the championship. And this is serious. Shortly thereafter, the Bowdoin's challenged. And the way the challenges work is each team could challenge once a year. And the challenges could be, you didn't have to accept a challenge more than one a month. So once you won the silver ball, you could be challenged by one other team a month in the next month, and then one other team the month after that, and so on. So there were, let's see, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams. You get 5 months. You could have the silver ball, and you could trail this out over 5 months in order to try to keep the ball. And you could, if you were challenged by 2 teams in the same month, you got to choose which one you'd play. It's up to you. So what happened quite frequently is that 3 or 4 teams would challenge, and since you got a several-month reprieve of having to play all the rest of them, you pick the worst one to play first, and so on. And that's exactly what happened when the Bowdoins beat the Eons for the silver ball. They got challenged by everybody, and they thought that they would take the weakest team of them all. They'd play Norway. They'd play the Pennesseewassies first. So they agreed to play the Pennesseewassies, and excuse me, on Saturday, October 19th in 1867, which will be this coming October 19th, will be 150 years from then. So that's the big celebration that we're having here, the 150th anniversary of this baseball game between the Norway-Pennesseewassies and the Bowdoin College Club. The team met at Brunswick because you had to play on the home field of the team that had the silver ball. So the Norwegians went down to Brunswick. They went in several different directions and several different ways. They didn't actually have money to all get on the train and go together. So they kind of arrived in Brunswick at various times, and they practiced. They were going to practice on the field, but they didn't want to give away all of their, they didn't want the Bowdoins to see exactly what all of the talent was going to be. So their pitcher, they had Clarence Smith be the pitcher. He wasn't really the pitcher. It says here he plays left field. They had Clarence Smith be the pitcher for the practice, so the Bowdoins would see Clarence Smith pitching and think that that was their pitcher. A lot of people don't realize that Nathaniel Hawthorne had a brother. There's another factoid for this evening. He had a brother named Frank who also went to Bowdoin. He was a younger brother. And Frank Hawthorne wrote in Tales of Bowdoin, if you have your copy of Tales of Bowdoin, which is a little book with a lot of interesting stories about Bowdoin, he wrote this about the game. He said, "What a scene, a regular Donnybrook fair in miniature. What a crowd, too. They had come from all over. The whole town, and a good part of Topsom had turned out, of course, and it seemed as if every livery team in Bath and Lewiston and Freeport had been called into commission for this occasion, with nearly all the farm wagons in the intervening country thrown in for good measure. On both sides of the Delta was that little triangle. If you come into Brunswick down Main Street and you're heading toward the college, you go up that hill, and there's a church there, and then behind it the road splits, and one goes down to Harpswell, and one goes to, I think, Muir Point. So that in that triangle, that's where the game was played. they called it Delta. On both sides of the Delta, the Bath Road and the Harpswell Road were jammed full of teams. Many of them gay turnouts with gay young men and women occupying them, but that was a different kind of gay in those days. And the cavalcade stretched way down into the pines and opposite the Dunlap Monument. The grandstand was filled to overflowing with students and the, quote, college girls of Brunswick, because Bowdoin was not co-ed at the time, but there were girls connected to college apparently. So this is in quote marks. The college girls of Brunswick, every window in the medical hall had been preempted and Jaegers swung from the branches of every nearby tree. Jaegers, right? Now our Norway neighborhood, if you're familiar, there's a Jaeger neighborhood up here, and there's ongoing discussion as to where the name came from and so on and so forth. But Jaegers apparently here means locals. Any comments, Charles, on Jaegers?
No, but locals is an interesting idea.
Thank you. Excuse me. So it was a big day in Brunswick. Everybody turned out. The local newspaper and the college newspaper called this team here, they called them the puny sawhorses. They said they were phenomenal farmers, but not very good ball players, they didn't think. They said, these are quotes from the local newspaper. They can bat, but they field like oxen. They put the silver ball, the Bowdoin College team put the silver ball in a glass case so it wouldn't be soiled by the hands of the farmers from Oxford County. Although interestingly, on the Bowdoin College team at the time, there were a couple of people I'm quite sure were actually from up in this area, from Oxford County, so they were, And another interesting person from Norway happened to be a Bowdoin student at the time too, was C.A. Stevens, was a student at Bowdoin in 1867 and was no doubt at the game, I would suspect. He had to be. C.A. Stevens actually was, I don't know if he played baseball, but in one of the local references here at the society, I found that he was, at one point, he was like a scorekeeper or a secretary for one of the baseball associations in the town. So he was somewhat interested. He was, no doubt he was at the game. And then he wrote the story, in 1930, he wrote the local story here in the paper about the game. So he obviously had an interest. So the game was about to be played here on October 19th. Let's say Eugene Fuller was supposed to be the pitcher, but the Bowdoins hadn't seen him. And Eugene Fuller, the way the rules worked at the time, the batter could call what kind of pitch they wanted: high, low, slow, fast. So the batter would say, "Okay, send me a high, fast one." And if the pitcher did that, and the batter couldn't hit it, that would be a strike. But if the pitcher said low, slow one, even if it was in what we would now call the strike zone, well, that would be a ball because it wasn't where the batter asked for it to be. Yep. That rule didn't actually last very long, but it was in play this time. And there were 3 balls and 3 strikes. And the umpires, according to Clarence Smith, the umpires very seldom call balls. They have to be, way out. I mean, balls that were other than the kind that, where the strike was the ball that came in the right place according to the batter, and the ball was the one that came in a different place. But apparently there weren't many balls that were other than those. So this Eugene Fuller was not only the Pennesseewassee's top pitcher, but he pitched underhand, and he apparently pitched some sort of curveball underhand. That's the way that Clarence Smith describes the ball that he pitched. So it was very difficult to hit. In the first inning, the Pennesseewassies came up to bat first, and they scored 4 runs. And Eugene Fuller's underhanded spinner, according to Clarence Smith, choked the Bowdoins. The term for an inning with no runs was a choke. So Bowdoin was choked in the first inning, and at the end of the first inning, the score was Pennesseewassies 4, Bowdoin 0. In the second inning, the Pennesseewassies scored another 4, and Bowdoin scored 2. So at the end of the second inning, the score was 8-2. It's looking pretty good for the Pennesseewassies here. In the third inning, the Pennesseewassies, however, got only 1 run, and Bowdoin, in their half of the inning, loaded the bases. So the bases, only 1 run, the bases are loaded for the Bowdoin team. And the batter hit the ball. It was a pop-up. Silas Burnham caught the fly ball, pop fly ball. There's one out. He threw to third baseman to tag the batter before he got back. There's 2 outs. Who tossed it to the second baseman who tagged that batter. Triple play, end of inning. Score at the end of third inning. Pennsewassee's 9, Bowdoin 2. In the 4th through the 7th innings, I didn't get from the various newspapers a breakdown of what happened in the inning, but I know what happened in the accumulation of the 4th through the 7th innings. Bowdoin scored 5, but the Pennessewassee scored 7. So in that period, Bowdoin came out too short, and the Pennessewassies in that period also managed 2 double plays. So the Oxford County team actually seemed to have the whole thing in hand. In one of the late innings, and I really wish I knew which inning it was, one of the Bowdoins hit a long fly ball, which Cyrus Tucker managed to lose track of. It bounced off Tucker's head, and Clarence Smith, who seemed to be in the right place at the right time, managed to catch the ball before it hit the ground. It was an out. The score at the end of 7 innings, Pennssewassee 16 and Bowdoin 7.
Any fatalities?
In the 8th inning, Pennssewassee scored 8, and the Bowdoins were completely out of steam. They could score only 1. And in the 9th, the Pennssewassee scored another 5, and they choked the Bowdoins for the 3rd time in the game. So the Bowdoins got none. The final score 29-8. The Pennsewassees thrashed them. Yeah. One of the observers at the game wrote a poem on the back of his collar, his cuff, and had it published in the local paper. The next day it went like this: "Majestic live oaks, your name shall stand when broken noses adorn the land. And forth next spring, at your captain's call, may you strike a blow for the silver ball, which now reposes mid cows and bosses. Up with those gentle Pennsewasses. For though Bowdoin swore they would never yield, they were choked to death on their chosen field. They got dismayed and could not rally at the cry of out instead of tally." Painful. The Portland paper, the Eastern Argus, which the Eastern Argus at the time was edited by this fellow named John M. Adams, who was from Andover, Maine, and was one of the big officers and movers of the Oxford Bear Association. He was one of the organizers of these annual meetings of the Oxford Bears. So he was a proud Oxford County man, and the story that he wrote in the paper said, the story runs that the national game in the classic shades Saturday, the Oxford Bears with their 8-pound bat struck a ball so high in the air that to the best of the knowledge and belief of the college boys it has not yet come down. There is no well-authenticated record that the Brunswick girls caught the sturdy Oxford boys in their arms after the victory. Had the game been played here, that is in Portland, friends of the eons might have done so, but as the manner stands, the duty must dissolve upon the corn-fed beauties of old Oxford County. In Norway, when they came back from the game, there was a huge parade put on by General Beale from the Beale's Hotel, and it was a big oyster dinner they had at Beale Hotel for the team. This was the last game of the season. It was in October, so the Pennssewassee didn't have to worry about the silver ball until the next year, 1868. And sure enough, in 1868, in the spring, several challenges came in, but actually the Pennsewassees were able to ditch them all because they spelled the name wrong. So they declared that it was not an official. It wasn't an official demand because they didn't know this other team was spelled this way. In May, that was in April, in May, they were challenged by the Androscoggins and the Pennssewassee of Lewiston, and the Pennssewassee beat the Androscoggins and kept the silver ball. Later on, in the summer, they beat the Crescents of Westbrook. They kept the silver ball. They then beat the Athletics of Portland and kept the silver ball. There was, since only one challenge per team per year was allowed, and the Bowdoin College was on holiday during the summer. They didn't get a challenge from Bowdoin, but the Eons were going to challenge them, and the Eons decided that they would challenge them in the middle of the summer because they figured that all of these guys were, you know, they had to be working out in the field, and they wouldn't be able to actually practice much, and so that would be the time to strike them, would be when they're, you know, at their weakest. But the Pennesseewassees had a scheme. In the course of being challenged by these other teams, they realized that each team was probably going to get tougher and tougher because they could choose who they were going to play, of course. And they got the Ursa Majors. You remember the Ursa Majors? Yes. One that beat by 100 points. They got the Ursa Majors to join the league. And then the Ursa Majors challenged them. And since the Pennesseewassee could choose who they're going to respond to, they chose, during haying season, they chose to play the Ursa Majors so they wouldn't have to play the Eons. And of course they trounced the Ursa Majors. And then there was another local team, I don't have the name here, there was another local team that they also played. But finally, they had to play the Eons. And the Eons, in the meantime, had absorbed the Portland Athletics. So the Eons, the Athletics had folded into the Eons. So the Eons from Portland now had the best players from their team as well as the athletic team. And the Pennesseewassies finally had to accept the Eons challenge. Unfortunately, when the game was going to be played, excuse me, the weekend that the game was going to be played, the Burnham brothers, there were three brothers here. Another Burnham brother had passed away in Portland, and they had to go to the funeral. They couldn't play, so the Pennesseewassies didn't have the Burnhams on their team. The Pennesseewassies lost to the Eons. The silver ball went back to Portland, and the Eons managed to hold on to the silver ball for some time. However, I believe it was 4 years later, the ball passed between various teams. The Pennesseewassies were never able to re-win the silver ball, primarily because these young men who were recently out of Hebron Academy and then had finished whatever college they were going to do, they were off. The whole Burnham family went off to Kansas someplace, and so on. Clarence Smith stayed in town, Cyrus Tucker stayed in town, but it wasn't the same team. And the Eons, on the other hand, managed somehow to lose the silver ball. They put an ad in the newspaper that claims, they said, the main championship baseball silver ball was stolen from us last week when we were on the train, and we give the perpetrators 3 days to give it back to us. The Pennesseewassies actually, in the Clarence Smith in this article says that he thinks that the Eons just melted it down and made little baseballs that the Eons could keep and just pretend that it had disappeared. But at any rate, the silver ball disappeared. It has never, ever been seen since. If you find it in a yard sale or an antique shop, many people need to know of this. But that was the story of the brief life of the silver ball here in Norway. And the Pennesseewassee team that 150 years ago brought glory to the town. I don't know if there's any other anniversary that would be a bigger celebration. But that's the story. That's the story of baseball generally and Norway baseball. And now I have the honor to segue to perhaps even a more important topic, which are hot dogs. Sally is going to discuss hot dogs. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer questions. I may not know the answer, but I'm happy to try.
Are there any photos of the silver ball? Do we know what it looks like?
I've never seen a photo of it, and I have no idea. No, I've never seen one. There probably is one someplace, because photography was quite common at the time. I suspect someplace there's a photo of the Eons standing there holding the silver ball. But I haven't seen it. Yes?
Why do you think the Globe in 1905, you said?
1907.
1907 was covering this game from way back. What was
this is my guess. The Globe. My guess is the Globe had a reporter who was stationed in Maine, probably in Portland, maybe in Lewiston. Let's say Lewiston. I bet they had a reporter in Lewiston, or there was a stringer, a Globe stringer in Lewiston, and happened to run into Clarence Smith. That's my guess. I don't think they had some independent knowledge of the game that came up for that reason. It would have been maybe on an anniversary or something. But my guess is they just stumbled into Clarence Smith, or stumbled into someone in town and said, if you want to talk to someone interesting, talk to Clarence Smith. Yeah.
Slow news time.
And actually, in 1930, so this is 1907, in 1930, C.A. Stevens wrote his story about the same game, which was published in a local paper. And a couple of months after that, Silas Burnham, the younger Burnham, wrote from, so he had read he must have been subscribing to the local paper, to the Norway paper out in Kansas. He wrote back from Kansas saying, that story that showed up in the paper a couple weeks ago was interesting, but missed a lot of important points, and I will now make them. And so he wrote another lengthy article on the game, from which I got a lot of the facts here. Yeah. Any other questions? Hot dog, Sally. Hot dog.